Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, October 14, 2024. Alastair Crooke will be with us in just a moment on why is Israel fighting 7 different wars at once. But first, this.
A divisive presidential election is upon us, and the winner is gold. Let me tell you what I mean. Since 2016, our national debt has grown a staggering 70%, and gold has increased by 60%. Do you own gold? I do. I bought my gold in February 2023, and it has risen 33%. You've heard me talk about Lear Capital, the company I trust. Let me tell you why. Recently, Kevin DeMerit, who is the founder and CEO of Lear, assisted the FBI in discovering a nationwide gold theft ring. And because of Kevin's good work, the FBI caught these people before they could steal anymore. That's why I have been saying the people at Lear are good people. They believe in America. They believe in their product, and they're honest to the core. So take action right now, my friends. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com. Protect your savings and retirement before it's too late. 800-511-4620, LearJudgeNap.com. Remember, hope is not a strategy, but gold is.
Alastair Crooke, good day to you, my friend, and welcome here. Thank you for your time, as always. We have much to discuss. The theme that I want to discuss with you is the theme of your most recent and tantalizing article. Why is the United States Israel's partner for war? But before we get there, let's talk about the latest breaking news. And that would be the reports of IDF killed and injured in southern Lebanon. It appears that at least 4 IDF have been killed and that about 68 have been injured. Now, these are very small numbers compared to the number of people that the IDF has slaughtered in Gaza, but these may be very significant numbers for the Israeli people. How do the Israeli people perceive this news?
I think it's shock and real concern, because they've largely been spared any real pain in this. Not true, of course, for the forces. The forces both in Gaza have suffered great losses, and increasingly, there's a lot of gaslighting going on, but the Israeli forces are still on the border with South Lebanon. They're not really crossing it at all. They've entered 3 villages, Maroon, which is about 800 meters from the border where the Irish post is, and then 2 other places, which are about 600 meters, and another place which is about quite close. So they've just gone in, and they're suffering enormously from ambushes and from anti-tank measures. They're losing more. They're losing more men than Hezbollah in the south. They have not been able to really penetrate into the south. So it's not a success. It's painful. People who've been there say it's grim process. I'm talking about Israelis who've been there and said, it's not nice at all. It's not going well at all. Then you've got Gaza, another terrible event taking place this morning in Gaza, an attack on hospital buildings by Israel and Palestinians, children being burnt alive. There are pictures of them being alive in a sort of absolute engulfed in flames and just impossible to reach, and just dying, being burnt alive. And this now has come. And as you say, much smaller in terms of casualties, but psychologically hugely important because it's south of Haifa. And this was in a dining room of the Golani Brigade, which is an elite brigade of troops. And in their training base there, they were all at dinner, and 2 drones came from across the Mediterranean, not directly over the land. And this one of them, we don't know quite why it was so successful in avoiding it. The Israelis say that somehow they thought they had it on the radar, and then it just dropped out of sight. Now, it may be a new form of drone, or it may be that it was guided by some sort of laser, but that's unlikely because of the distance from Lebanon for it to reach this. But it's caused a great fright to both the authorities, but people generally. This large loss. Well, it's quite a large loss of life, but the injured, I mean, the death rate is likely to go up from 4, which it is at the moment, because there are 68 injured and some of them seriously.
Does the IDF typically reveal the true and accurate numbers of its forces that have been killed and injured, or does the Netanyahu government choose to keep this from the Israeli public?
Absolutely kept from the Israeli public, firstly, but also from the United States, from that, if you like, that segment of the population that is pro-Zionist in the US. So they're kept from them because what's happening in a sense is, I call it, and this is a metaphor, of course, is that there's so much gaslighting, so much propaganda coming out of Israel. It's really like a Ponzi scheme. You know, when you have a Ponzi scheme, you have to keep the thing going. You know, you always have to have new money coming in, which more than compensates for any money going out. So the propaganda, so the gaslighting has to be kept going, and it has to be keep going. And as soon as someone sort of suggests there's a problem or a difficulty, it gets doubled down, because otherwise the Ponzi scheme collapses. If too much is sort of lost, and I'm talking here about not about money going out, but you know, bad news comes in. Because at the moment the news is, what is the Ponzi scheme? The Ponzi scheme is Israel's on a winning streak. It's set to remake the Middle East. It's set to take on and land a blow on Iran. That is the Ponzi scheme. That is the narrative. So anything that goes against it says, no, that isn't actually what happened. That isn't what happened at that a big air base in the Negev, where it seems now that actually there was the latest American radar, the X-band radar from Raytheon, which is the only radar that really provides Israel with the ability to pinpoint when a missile may be fired further in the region, as well as to indicate when it's, you track it as it's coming. And it seems very certain that Iran actually used possibly a hypersonic missile, but a fast-flying missile, and took out this expensive main X-band radar. Is the sort of, if you like, the jewel in the crown of Israel's defensive. And then the 20 missiles landed on the airbase. This is the cash going out of the Ponzi scheme when people start talking about that.
When
is it such a
States, pardon me?
No, sorry, I'm saying that's when people start to get anxious, and we saw Netanyahu very anxious when he said, "Oh, and we had Biden as part of this too," because he said, "Oh no, they defeated it all, and they defeated those Iranian missiles. They were totally ineffective." Just not true.
Right. When the United States gives a very expensive and unique piece of equipment like this radar you're talking about to Israel, and then it's destroyed by Iranian or Hezbollah missiles, do they tell the United States, or do they keep that secret as well?
The Pentagon will know about it. Does it penetrate properly into that sort of inner circle of pro-Zionists around the president? It's not clear that he knew that, because, I mean, what he was saying, and he repeated it several times, all of the missiles from Iran were eliminated, were shot down. They were ineffective. They were defeated. It's not, and it's the opposite. They didn't shoot down any of them. nor did the American vessels who were in the offshore. They fired 12 missiles. They took down none of the Iranians. I can't tell you exactly how many got through, but we're talking something of the order of 90%, something substantial, if you like. Some of them were decoy missiles, not intended to cause damage or to destroy things, but to deflect any air defenses that Israel. It was, in short, a major failure of Western air defense systems, not just Israelis, but Western air defense systems, which is why suddenly we have the United States prepared to send an air defense system, a THAAD system, with 100 American troops to Israel. And this is a major success, of course, because what I've been saying all along with is Netanyahu's aim is to pull the United States into the war. Well, they're very vulnerable. And if Israel attacks Iran, Iran will have every reason to attack that air defense system wherever it's located, probably in Netzrim in the Negev desert, I should think.
With the American troops, we understand the numbers around 100, sent ostensibly, I underscore ostensibly, to operate and maintain this equipment. Would they be a tripwire? Is this an excuse? Are they out there so that when they are attacked, Joe Biden and company have an excuse, Benjamin Netanyahu has an argument for more American troops?
Precisely. I mean, this is the whole plan, dating back a long time, to gradually bring the United States in to a war with Iran. And this is precisely the first step, because if that missile system is attacked by Iran in retribution for what Iran suffers from Israel in this next period, which is promised, we don't know what it will be exactly. But yes, and because also it's not a very effective system. It has, and is fairly limited. It can have, I think, something, I'm not an expert in these things, but it has about a full battery, such as is being sent to Israel, has about, I think, 27 interceptors are available to it. You fire 2 at every time, at every target. So it brings it down quite considerably. The Iranians only have to send probably, twice that number of decoys. And even that, even if they don't use a hypersonic missile and take it out directly, as they did with the X-band radar. So it's a very different, situation, very dangerous, because of course, a red line for America has been when its troops are killed in the Middle East. And this will be a red line crossed and justifying, in the view of many in those circles in the United States, an escalation against Iran, clearly.
Big picture, what has made the United States Israel's partner in war? Is it the influence of the Israeli donor class on American politics, or is it America's lust for oil, or is it something else, or is it a combination of those things?
Well, as I wrote about, and I was drawing on the experience of Professor Michael Hudson, who worked in the Hudson Institute in the 70s, 74 to 76. And he was there at this time when it really started. And everything we've seen since really began around about that time, between the Hudson Institute, Herman Kahn, who was in charge of it, and Scoop Jackson, who was a very celebrated senator, represented the military-industrial complex. He came from Washington State, but he was also the Democratic contender for presidency twice. So a formidable presence then in the Democratic Party, although many of the, if you like, Stoop Jacksonists then went over to the Republican, which is why you've got the, if you like, the confluence in the uniparty of the neocons are both in the Democratic and in the Republican Party. That's how it happened when he split from the Democrats and has moved across to the Republicans. But the aim of it, and it was very clear, the Hudson Institute was working at that stage with Uzi Arad, whom I used to know when I was there. Uzi Arad was a formidable, really hard line. You know, you talk about the right on Israel now. He was absolutely in line with Ben Gvir and Smotrich and all of the rest.
Was he
His view
Mossad?
was to kill, yeah, and then he became head of Mossad. Not just Mossad, he was head of Mossad. And his view was, you know, and he kept saying this then in the 70s, you know, the solution to where we are is we have to kill the Arabs, kill the Arabs. Kept saying this all the time. And what Herman Kahn did was say to Senator Jackson, look, this is the solution for how we are able to sort of progress the empire in the Middle East, because we need the oil. We must have the oil, and we've got to have the oil. And this is the way to do it. We can't field an army. After the Vietnam War, it was quite clear because at the time, the presidential aspirant had to drop out of the competition because of the anti-war sentiment. Having conscription, a draft was just no longer acceptable. So war had to be, if you like, supported by not actually occupying and invading. There was a small affair in Iraq in 2003, but it wasn't really a fighting force because the Iraqis had already surrendered. They'd already accepted monetary compensation and other things. So it had to be done by bombing and by, if you like, terrorism, about, you know, actually subjugating people. And so the plan from 73, 74 was, if you like, so to make life so unbearable for Palestinians that they either decide it wasn't worth living and just go and find somewhere to go to. Or if they wouldn't go, you bomb them and you kill them, because you don't have to lose forces. If you bomb, you don't lose your own men in this process. This is what was said, and Professor Hudson says, I was in these meetings. I was there in the Hudson when all of this was discussed. And Scoop Jackson bought into this. And so then he made sure to put Zionists in State Department. And he made sure to put the Zionists in the National Security Council. And so they were there to make sure that this idea and this thinking was, if you like, built out and developed and embedded so that it couldn't be easily rolled back. And so for all these years, it's done. And what happened to the Palestinians was an exact copy from Vietnam. The hamlets, the dividing of hamlets, the dividing of the Palestinians. A lot of the Vietnam theory came in through that period and through Stoop Jackson and the Jacksonites, Wolfowitz, Richard Pearl, all these people who then became the sort of the neocons. And the aim was not just to take the Palestinian area, but to take Lebanon, to take all of the, if you like, if you think of the Middle East divided east and west, east is sort of Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, which weren't difficult for the United States to manage. But the other part in the west, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, all of these had to be, if you like, attrited by bombing and by force so that they could be brought to some form of surrender. On one side, you had the jihadists as a proxy force, and the other side, you had Israel as the other proxy force. But the aim was to go right through. The question is it going to work today? Is there going to be pushback in the United States that will, stop it? Clearly, there's some in the Pentagon who are sort of questioning this and saying we're overextended as it is. I mean, can we really sort of contemplate? Because, not only is Israel talking about invading Lebanon, and then now the White House says it wants to completely change the political disposition of Lebanon. They want to actually put in a proxy president of Lebanon. But they've even invaded Syria recently, invaded with forces into Syria, only about 500 meters or so. But they've made it clear that, this isn't just about the Palestinian, it is about taking a whole swathe of land. And what's the White House reaction? Full support for what they're doing in Lebanon. We can change the whole character of the region, is what Blinken is saying and Hochstein is saying in Lebanon. We want General Aoun to be the new president, and we want to make sure the Shi'i are removed from politics altogether. Very dangerous process, because it could start a civil war again in Lebanon. This was after the civil war that these things were sort of divided up, and the president is Christian.
How does Europe and how does the Kremlin view this partnership of Americans giving the Israelis whatever they want, whether it's because of the donor class in America or the American lust for oil?
Well, I mean, firstly, I'd say what they understand very clearly, that this is, what we're seeing is a charade. This is good cop, bad cop. America says, oh, no, I mean, we have values. We have the values of the United States, and we're pursuing those. Israel is, and it's all Netanyahu, and Netanyahu is out of control. This is just a charade, because they both have, there's a confluence of interests. American influence is to weaken the if you like, the power of Iran ultimately, which they see is going to weaken Russia. So they want to weaken Iran, and they want to get at Iran through Hezbollah and through Syria. And so there's a confluence of interests. One plays the bad cop, that's Netanyahu's role. And if you like, the White House is saying, oh no, well, we're trying to get restraint. But the reality is everything that Netanyahu wants is given to him. Money, the bombs. You don't see any real pushback except something from the Pentagon. That's true. You see something from the Pentagon from there. But is it enough to stop this embedded? I mean, these are deep-seated policy initiatives in the United States. These are what I call these, these are the structural, deep structural layers of foreign policy has always been the support for Israel and the aim to control the Middle East. And if they can get at Iran, of course, they crush China, because then China loses its own source of fuel and oil. It's heavily dependent on Iran. It would be a major blow to China strategically, and of course would weaken Russia, which depends on Iran for the whole of the, if you like, Central Asia corridor, because Iran has that experience. Russia has a certain drawback there. So it all makes sense, and that's why we see, this confluence of interest. But for presentational purposes, of course, we're trying to dissuade Israel from going ahead. But America's interest has been, for 50 years, this project in the Middle East to bring it under the US government control. This is a neocon project. It doesn't belong to this or that, but it combines, if you like, parts of all the parties.
Will Russia ever allow the United States, without resistance on the part of the Russians, to damage Iran?
No, I don't believe they will. And I believe that's why they've been providing Iran with assistance, with weapons, with missiles, with air defense systems, with electronic warfare. And I think they're very determined. I don't think, and I think there's been a big change. And I think, with the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, marked a big sort of shift in thinking, because before that, we were in the era of sort of careful calculation, incremental moves up the escalatory ladder. And I've said that before, and I know that it was all being carefully calibrated. I think, what's understood in Russia is we're no longer playing chess. We haven't got an adult on the other side of the chessboard. What we have to do now is to get the message across is you have to take a hammer and smash the chessboard. That's the change that's taken place in this recent period.
I'm going to play a little clip actually two clips from the very public meeting of President Pezeshkian of Iran and President Putin of Russia, and ask you for your thoughts. Chris, please play consecutively number 2 and number 3.
I am very glad, dear Mr. President, that there is an opportunity to meet you personally and discuss our current issues. Relations with Iran are a priority for us, and they are developing very successfully.
We have many opportunities now. We should help each other in many areas. Our viewpoints and positions in the world are much closer to each other than to those of others. God willing, we will take part in the BRICS summit and will do everything to sign agreements that will allow beneficial mutual cooperation.
Did they sign a mutual defense pact?
No, they didn't, not then. But I just want to say about this, I mean, we don't have much detail of what was the substance of the sudden meeting. And so only guesswork, and I have my guesses. But it's certainly, he's not the man to talk about mutual defense or defense pact. Pezeshkian, knows nothing about the military. He's a heart surgeon and has always been, a doctor. He's not served in the forces. He's not the interlocutor for having a discussion with Putin. This was being done by Shoigu with the National Security Council.
What is your gut?
It wasn't about that.
What is your gut feeling as to why this sudden, ostentatious public meeting?
I think this, and is my gut guesswork, is that recently you've heard quite a lot from Iran about needing to change its doctrine about nuclear weapons. And that it's thinking of it, and about 39 members of the parliament then wrote to the supreme leader saying they wanted it sort of considered. Look, if that happens in Iran, the supreme leader is not opposed to it. It's, this is a little bit of theater going on. Clearly something is changing in terms of the doctrine. My sense is that when Iran gets to the point where it's talking about changing the doctrine, it's already almost at the point where that doctrine can be implemented by just putting fissile material into a receptacle or something like that. But don't forget that Russia, Putin is a lawyer, but Russia is against proliferation. And so is formally the BRICS. And so I would think that probably, possibly, but guesswork, is that they were discussing how to manage the question of proliferation if it happens, and the doctrine is being changed. After all, Russia's just changed its doctrines. So, there is an understanding that circumstances can change, and you may need to change your doctrine. So I would think that it may be that he was called to really talk about how to manage the sort of diplomacy, the big diplomacy, BRICS and Russia, about it if were Iran to change its doctrine on nuclear weapons.
How do you see the resistance coalescing to stop Israel from continuing to slaughter innocent civilians?
First of all, I mean, as I tried to indicate, really, we're in a new phase. And in this phase, there's still a desire to not let things get out of control. I mean, that's the desire on all members of the resistance to do this slowly. We still see that Hezbollah are not using, they're still using rockets and sort of drones and things. They haven't used their big, very accurate long-range and medium-range missiles, which they could do. So Iran has not used it directly against the infrastructure of Israel, although that might be the next step that's going to happen. But the Houthis have said they're going to really escalate the war by taking much firmer action and widening the level of interception and intervention to prevent vessels moving towards Israel, and perhaps even to end the sort of land corridor, to undermine the rat route that is run by UAE through to Israel overland in trucks, which still continues. So maybe something like that will come under a greater effect. Eilat port has already had to file for bankruptcy because it has no business any longer. And as you'll have seen, and this recent drone attack underlines it, this barracks, Binyamin Barracks, is just south of Haifa. And Haifa has been under continual rocket fire from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. Every day, 100, 200 missiles landing in Haifa. So the port isn't functioning either.
Do things like a non-functioning port or the deaths of 4 IDF, Chris informs me all of them were 19 years old, have a political effect on the Netanyahu government?
Yeah, that's why I mean, it links into the two things that I said. These were recruits. They were, I mean, I know they were recruits and they were young recruits, but it was a big base. And the Golan is the special forces base, if you like. And they landed in it in that way. It has a big, when I say it has a big psychological effect, it's huge. But, you know, this is what I talk about the Ponzi scheme, in the sense Netanyahu has to keep the language going, the Ponzi scheme saying, we're on a winning streak, we're beating them, we've beaten them in Gaza, we're beating them in Lebanon, we're now going to land a terrific, they won't know what's hit them when we strike in Iran. And when something like this happens, people start to say, well, you know, are you sure this narrative holds? Is it really valid? Is this true? And so there's a sort of swirling of anxiety in Israel, beginning people say, well, you know, we're not sure all of this. I mean, are we really winning or are we losing? And so he can't afford that. And that's why, really, in many ways, an attack on Iran has become now or never in terms of Israeli politics, and I think the politics of some of those in the White House. It's now or never. Now's the time. We've persuaded everyone that, you know, that Israel is on this winning streak. We can have a new Middle East. We can get rid of all the problematic parts of it, and we can go on and win. And then suddenly people have these great fear. They see what's happening in South, where they're saying the public line is we're slicing through Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. And the truth is they're only a few hundred meters into it and losing lots of men. And so people start to say, well, now you want to take on Iran, a big country like Iran? Is this really wise, or is this going to finish us? Or is this going to destroy us? And I think that is on one side. I mean, really deep division in Israel like that. And I think there's an element of this also in America too. And Europe doesn't count in this thing. But in America, it's happening with the Pentagon. I think there are people in the Pentagon who understand exactly what happened on the 1st of October with this. With the Iranian missiles coming in, and it completely overwhelmed the defenses, the air defenses of Israel. But it also showed that America doesn't have air defenses that are really substantive. I mean, this is a major strategic thing, that if they can't stop Iranian missiles and weren't able to stop them with all of the Arrow and X-band radar and things like that, then, does America have that ability in principle? And the answer was, a great big sort of question mark. So I think, the Pentagon is also having these sort of questions. But against that, and this is where I'm pessimistic, I think it's, the sense of it's now or never. Now is the chance. We've got the public support at the moment. It could evaporate at any time. Let's go on. And of course, in America, I'm sorry to put this sort of rather crudely, there's a big pot of money that is sitting there and is being doled out to Congress, aspirants on both sides, large sums of money for fighting as campaign contributions from this huge pot. So we're supporting Israel. Everyone on left or right, yes, we're supporters of Israel because they need a big slice of that pot of money. And it's most unfortunate this is happening at this time.
Alastair Crooke, thank you, my dear friend. Always fascinating for us in the East Coast of the U.S. An eye-opener at breakfast listening to you. Thank you. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
Of course. Coming up later today at 10 in the morning, Ray McGovern. At 11 in the morning, Larry Johnson. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, Scott Ritter. At 5 this afternoon, Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.